All right, study system logs, how to use them. So let's go over what the basic components of a study system log is. So on the left side, you're going to see the legend. What the legend basically does is incorporates the three different stages of the learning process of the study system for us. The evaluation stage, the verification stage, and then the assessment stage. You want to do all three of them in order to get the most out of this. You'll find in a second that you could verify and evaluate simultaneously sometimes if you are trying to recall information you've already gone over rather than be introduced to information for the first time. We'll talk about that. All right, so first off, for your options for the evaluation stage, you have study, which is like it sounds, study your notes, study the book, study the resource, whatever it is. Concept mapping is you make a concept map from the notes. So you look at the information provided on the PowerPoint, you make your own concept map from it so that you have a condensed amount of information rather than all the notes, which is pretty effective. Video, you watch either one of my PowerPoint videos on the topic ahead of time, as you're doing right now, or you look at someone else's video to give yourself background on the topic. Very important, especially for those of you guys that prefer watching something to get a better understanding of the concepts. Retrieve is something that you typically would do after a lecture rather than before. So this is not something you use for previewing at all. Retrieve is you're basically going to sit down and try to recall all the information you can about a topic. So that could be making notes from scratch based on what you remember about the topic. That could be reciting the notes out loud. And you'll see that for retrieve, you're basically overlapping with verification. And that's exactly what it is. So when you're retrieving, you're actually going to combine these two stages together because you're trying to recall something you've already gone over rather than learn it for the first time. So for the other options for retrieve would be the concept map, making notes from scratch, or reciting. And you can see some overlap once again in a second. All right, so after you're done with that, then you do the verification. The verification can take a couple different forms. You can recite out loud. So whatever you took your notes on or whatever concept that you went over, you try to recite it out loud. You try to teach somebody, or teach the wall, whatever you prefer, or teach your group when you get to that stage. Redo your notes means that you have a basic understanding of what the concept is, and now you're trying to recall it. And the more times you try to force yourself to recall information from memory, the better off you are. Looking at your notes while you're doing this stage is not going to be effective. So when you're doing this verification, you want to have your notes put away for the most part. Concept map, just like it sounds. Let's say you make a concept map at the beginning for your evaluation stage. Now you're going to make another one in order to see if you really understood the concept well enough. And the last option is cross-check. So cross-check usually occurs if you want to cross-check your stuff with the notes itself. So this works or is necessary whenever you're in the retrieval stage. So if you're retrieving as your first stage, cross-checking should be your second stage for the most part, because you want to make sure that whatever you wrote down, your map, whatever you recited, whatever you did in terms of making a new set of notes, that was accurate. So you cross-check it with your notes itself. Once you're done with that, you're going to take a 15-minute break because you need to recharge. You don't want to just keep on going work, work, work. It's not going to work. You need to recharge your mind, let yourself step away from it. And that's really effective. As strange as it sounds, when you forget information, you have a better chance of being able to recall it later. Times that you force yourself to try to recall something, especially from memory, the more effective it is. So you want to give yourself a break, recharge, go do whatever you want to do. Catch up on your emails or do whatever else. Something enjoyable, preferably, because what you're trying to do is produce more dopamine, which is basically the save button for your brain. And the better mood you are, the more likely you're going to be productive when you come back. So you take your break, 15 minutes, and you come back. And the first thing you would do at this stage is you have some options. This is where you assess your understanding. Did you really understand what you just did? You can self-test. So these are obviously available on Moodle. You could always take a self-test. In the event that you don't want to self-test or you can't find a good one, use the homework as a test. Put away all your notes, put away all your practice problems or anything that can help you with the information, and treat the homework as a test, which basically means time it without anything in front of you and see how much you can recall. You want to do that is because it gives you an opportunity to better understand, did you really get the concept? Did you understand what you're doing? Instead of just sitting there looking at the practice problem and trying to replicate it. The more times you simulate testing conditions, the better off you'll be, and the less time you'll spend later to actually study, because you will already know the material at that point. In the event you don't have homework, or maybe you want to try something else, flashcards. So you obviously have the Anki decks available for each unit. You can use that to just test yourself real quick. Or teach. Teach just means you sit there and try to lecture your parents, your group, somebody else, the wall, doesn't really matter. All right, so those are the different components or different options for the 3 stages. Now let's go over to what you need to do. So the first thing you want to do is you kind of want to plan out what you're going to be doing. So let's say this is going to be the week of 8/15. We date it, and we're going to map out our week. So let's assume that you're just going to go 5 days a week of studying. Now, realistically, you have the weekends and other things, but let's say each day the minimum amount of time you have for studying is 10 hours. All right, so what you want to do now is distribute your study sessions accordingly so that you can take advantage of 10 hours. Now, obviously, you're going to have more some weeks, less other weeks. I know what you're saying. What if I have a lot of homework? Well, that's part of this, right? It's not like you're doing it in addition to, you're doing it as part of this. So don't look at it that way. So let's say we're doing chem. And now my days, I'm going to dedicate Mondays. And what you want to do is have 1 or 2 day gap between what we want to do as our study sessions. So let's say we're going to go Monday and Thursdays for chem. You can do Mondays and Wednesdays as well. What you don't want to do is back to back. You don't want to do back to back is because it's important to give yourself some time between when you first get introduced to an idea and then when you reinforce it. And also because it becomes overboard. You know, spending 3-4 hours studying straight is not effective. If you have 3 hours a week to study total, if you divide that into the 7 days and do it every couple of days, you're much more productive and you get more out of it than if you try to do back to back to back. So the reason we want to have this little gap is to take advantage of that. And that's what research has shown is that when you give yourself a few days between, going through a topic, your mind is able to, one, digest some of the information, and two, it's able to make more out of that next session that you're going to be using. So keep that in mind as you're developing your sequence or your week. So we're just going to spend 2 hours. These are the 2 days. Now, does that mean that you don't have any work in the other days? No. But what we're doing is we're going to treat this like a job. So for these 10 hours, we're going to try to take advantage of it as much as possible and use that to study, because that's what school is more or less. It's a job. So let's say we also have math, and you could do this for your other class, and you could do Mondays and Thursdays for that as well. And the reason for that is that you have at least 2 hours, right? Now, realistic, some of you guys have 4 or 5 hours. Some of you guys have 1 hour certain days because of work, other responsibilities. You have to figure out what works for you schedule-wise and then map it out. So for math, I'm going to go Mondays and let's say Wednesdays. And I could do the same for the other classes. Now, you can increase the number of days. I would suggest at least 2 times a week dedicated to studying. And as part of 2 days, you could be doing the homework for the class. So please don't look at it as that, oh, it's in addition to. It's not that severe. What you're trying to do is just create a routine for yourself that certain days a week you're going to be studying content or doing something related to these classes. Because the more you do of this, the more it's going to stick in your long-term memory. And the better you can do in the final, the more you can recall at the end of the semester. And then the class becomes useful. If you go through a whole year of a class and you don't remember anything the next year of it, it was a waste of a year. You don't want to do that to yourself. Because when you are learning this information like chem or history or whatever else, you're like, I'm never going to need it. Well, in college, you're going to be taking science again, chem more than likely, and history again. If you have a foundation that you built in high school, then you have an easier time in college. But if you do the cram and jam, then you're not going to be able to remember anything. And that's going to come back and haunt you because you have no foundation in college. You have to start from scratch. And it's just not going to be productive. All right. So anyways, we could do this for all our classes, up to 5. You could try to map out what you're going to do for the week for that class. And this could be the same for throughout the year. All right. So now we're going to go to an actual study session. So I'm doing chem. The topic's going to be states of matter. And this should have actually moved over here, so my apologies. It should have been on this line right here. I put it over on the left side for whatever reason. All right, so stage 1, what am I doing? So let's say that this is before I start the concept, so I'm going to go concept map. I'm going to build this concept map as I'm looking at the notes, the PowerPoint. Stage 2, for my verification stage, and let's say for the concept map, it took me about 15 minutes. 15, 20 is probably the most you're going to look at. Verification, I want to verify that I actually understood what I did. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to sit there and after I did my concept map from the notes, I don't need to cross-check it because I already used my notes for that to make the concept maps, so it's kind of redundant. So instead what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to recite my notes out loud. So I'm going to try to recite as much of it as I can from memory. Um, and then once you're done with that, let's say this took another 5-10 minutes at the most. Reciting is probably going to take about 5. I'm going to take my 15-minute break, and I'm going to come back. And when I come back, my choice for assessment is going to be I'm going to do the homework. Now, you want to do this, like let's say I have homework for States of Matter tonight. I want to start off by doing a review of the material, reciting or doing something of it, and then doing the homework. Why? Because then you have easier time of doing the homework because you understand what the heck you're doing. And let's say the homework took 30 minutes. All right, so now we have 45, that's 15 minutes. That's my whole session. And I time myself, right? Because I want to give myself a certain amount of time. And your homework should take under an hour for each assignment. In the event it takes like more than 30 minutes for a particular assignment, then you break into more than one session. You don't need to do all of it at one time unless you're pressed for time because you waited the night before. All right, so let's say we did this and we did the lecture tomorrow. This is the night before, hypothetically. So we do the lecture, and then the next day, the day after the lecture, 24 hours, not the day of, the day after the lecture, what I'm going to do is do it again. So I'm going to go States of Matter. And I should have put the date here. So this should be like 8/15, hypothetically. Let's say this is 8/17, so 2 days after, the day after the lecture. Evaluation stage. I've already gone over the lecture, so I'm going to do, instead of do the first 3, I'm going to sit there and retrieve the information. So I'm going to recall everything I can from memory. I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper. Your choice, whether you want to do it as a concept map, just write out, whatever format you want, or you want to recite it out loud, it's pretty much up to you. So let's say that took me about 10 minutes. Now I'm going to cross-check it. You always want to cross-check when you have retrieval as your first stage, because you want to see if you're actually accurate. So I'm going to cross-check over my notes to see, did I miss anything? Was everything accurate? Let's say it took a little longer because, I need to make sure I did everything correctly. Now I'm going to take my break, 15 minutes. And then when I come back for my assessment, I think I have a pretty good idea what's going on with this, but I want to do some flashcards just to make sure. So I do my Inky-Dex. That usually takes 5 minutes, but let's assume it's 10 for this one. And now we're done. That's our session. So that's how it works. So these will be all chem sessions. So you're looking at maybe 4 sessions of chem a week, at least for the study system stuff. Let's say we make this math, make this English, and so on and so forth. And you do the same thing for each of those. Now, why do you want to do this? You want to establish a routine for yourself. You want to get to the point where you have a system for learning where you don't have to study for finals or probably not even unit tests, because if you do this consistently, you're going to find you're really ready for those exams, and you don't have to sit there and cram the night before because all this will already be in your mind. You've reinforced it enough times, it's just automatic, and you're able to use it. So you want to do this for each of your classes, at least the ones that you feel that they're going to be problematic. You don't need to just repeat, obviously, but the classes you think they're going to be problematic, you want to establish some sort of routine for yourself. And as you can see, the max you want to do for any particular class is about 4 sessions a week. Sometimes you just do homework in the absence of this, but for at least our purposes, at least 2 times a week, you need to go through this process of doing this for it completely. If you do your homework one night without filling a log out, it's not the end of the world, but at least twice a week, you're going to be doing it this way just to make sure you get the most out of it.